right. Welcome to another episode of Talk to the Doctor. I'm here today with my good friend Charlie Fox. How you doing, mister?
I'm doing great, Doc. Good
Awesome.
to be here. We've been talking about this for a long time.
I know. I'm really stoked to be able to do this. And, I just want to dive right in. I want to ask you because you just have such an awesome, interesting story. And most of us know some of it, because we all grew up here. But I think there's a lot about your life that would just be really interesting for us here. So just tell me, where did it all start, like as a grom?
It started here. Let's see. I've been here my whole life. I think I was transported here from Stanford Hospital at the age of 1.
Nice.
My grandfather bought a house and had a house here on Mariposa Street. I think they bought it in the 50s or 60s.
Oh my God! For like 8,000 or some gnarly
Something
number,
stupid.
insane.
Don't worry, the IRS has it now. So I always drive. I go by it and I go,
Whoa, my
dang
God.
it, man. But anyway, so I was a little guy in that house, and we, of course, went to Mariposa, but mostly T Street because T Street had a beach.
And
right?
it was Grom. It was just Grom Central, Yeah. So you lived in Mariposa, which I also did live on that street. My first street in town was Escalones. So I was right in that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
But you gravitated toward T Street. I myself gravitated instantly toward the pier. The pier was just my jam. I don't know.
I had no jam because I think I was like 2 or 3.
Yeah, there was no
right?
pier when you're 2 or 3.
Yeah.
T Street. So initially at T Street, right? You're a Grom. Tell me, how did that sprout into who did you meet and who became your crew? And because I think we have a picture of you as a little Grom at T Street.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Yeah, I was a super Grom.
God,
super
you're
Grom.
2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
And that's such an awesome pic.
So the guys that I still remember, like first, second grade, being down at T Street, and you remember the snack bar, Cropley's. I just never had the money. I don't think I think I maybe had a taste of a burger there because they were like $2, and it was like I didn't get any money. My parents didn't give me money because I was in training to be a rat, and so like first, second grade, hanging with Court Morgan, Archie, Kelly O'Connell.
And you guys were you lived in Mariposa. Does that mean you went to Las Palmas or Concordia?
So then we moved to Presidio. We got a house
Ole Hansen.
So I went to Ole Hansen I sampled every school. So I started out in kindergarten, and I still remember, this is one thing I remember. It's coming to my head right now. So I was at Ole Hansen, and I was sitting in there, and I still remember the classroom. And you remember it had the overhead projector thing.
Yes.
Yeah, where they write. And she wrote the biggest word I'd ever seen. And I was like shaking my head going,
oh boy,
this is not for me. It was directions. It was directions.
The word directions.
And she says, this is what you're going to learn. And I'm like, I was just directions.
Overwhelmed.
I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, and I wasn't real good at it. But the word, it was so long. It was just overwhelming. So that's where I started. Ole Hansen. Then I went to Our Lady of Fatima for first grade.
Okay.
For first grade, and then second grade back to Ole Hansen.
If you were on Presidio, you were right there at Our Lady.
Yeah. And then second grade, Ole Hansen, then third, fourth, fifth was Our Lady of Fatima until they asked me to leave.
They didn't ask me even in elementary school.
Yeah.
Such a prankster.
I still remember there was a skunk in the courtyard, and it was like trapped in there, and there was I think the Seabus twins. I was always trying to get people to do stuff. I still kind of do that.
Such an instigator.
Totally.
Prankster instigator.
So I remember the younger brother, I go, hey, look right there under the tail. And it was because it was up against this little brick wall. I still remember it. And he did, right? And the tail lifts up. Tail lifts up. I'll never forget. The tail lifts up in this little pucker thing. I can remember it's like this pink thing.
Oh.
So I never checked the book afterwards, but I remember seeing it and went, wow. And then it opened up, and I see this gas stuff come out.
Oh, my God.
And then we chased
it
into the principal's office.
And then they said, Charlie, we love you and all, but you're out of here.
Not yet. No, there's another. I got accused of some other things that weren't true, actually. That was true, but some other things. But, yeah, then I went to and then we were actually living down at Los Winds at that time when I was in 4th grade. So
by then you would be at Concordia,
yeah.
Right?
So I was then
literally
6th grade.
At every school in town.
Yeah, 6th grade was Concordia.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was in Concordia, and that's when.
Probably met a lot of the.
Oh yeah, so in my class it was like Ronnie De La Rosa and Archie and Court, and so we were all kind of like back together and
cool.
surfing and everything. And then
I just saw Ronnie last weekend. Yeah, we went out to a dinner for his wife's birthday last weekend. Yeah, super cool. So funny, this little town. Let me just cut straight into like, let's talk about when did you get your first board kind of thing, you know?
So the first board I got, I was walking because I grew up over by Leslie Park, and I was walking on the street right next to it where Steve Ward used to
cool neighborhood.
live.
I just want to say,
amazing
what a cool neighborhood. There's no better neighborhood.
No.
It's the best neighborhood in this town in every way, shape, and form, right?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just rad. Just everything about it. Reminds me of like a coastal version of like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn kind of. It just looks so
at that time, especially.
Awesome. Yeah. Before it was too built. But anyway, so you were there.
So I'm just walking by, and I see this board sticking out of the trash can. It was a knee board, and the whole tail was gone. It had the deck.
Well, if it was a kneeboard, it might have been Roy's kneeboard.
Well, that's what I was just thinking, because Roy lived right on the other side.
And he was a kneeboard.
Yeah, and it was so anyway. So then I took it home, and then my mom had someone. She worked at San Clemente Hospital, and somebody could supposedly fix it, right? So then this dude, whoever could fix it, my mom was single at the time, so who knows what he was thinking. But so the board finally gets back to me. It's the shittiest patch job. I still remember it. It was like this, like, because patch jobs weren't too good back then.
No, yeah.
Unless they were done right.
Unless
they were done at the surf spot or something. But the surf spot wasn't in existence then. And so I still remember it's just like this ragged brown thing. And I think I took the board out, and I was riding it, and then the whole tail thing fell off, and I was like, okay. So then I heard about duct tape, and then I was kind of always going to the pawn shop, the Tony's pawn shop, and just kind of getting boards
Giovanni's
there. Yep. They lived next door to me.
Okay.
Up on Presidio. So my dad my dad was super good friends.
Then,
at first, when I was like super grom, and then I started getting real serious surfing, and like by like 6th grade. I think it was 6th, 7th grade. I started. I call Mckelroy. I got his phone number somehow, and I was like, "This is Charlie Fox. I want to get on your team." He's like, I don't remember what he said, but somehow I ended up at his house.
Cool.
Hans and I rode our bikes over there.
Right over here, a couple blocks from here.
Yeah. And then he's super cool, and he hooked me up with this.
And he was
the man.
Rest in peace, right? Yeah. All reverence toward Chris Mckelroy.
Yeah.
What an awesome dude. Yeah. I mean, we all have stories about that guy.
Yeah.
What an awesome dude.
Yeah.
Just what an awesome dude.
Yeah, and so he hooked me up. He got me set up with a board, and
is that the one I see in the picture with the twin? Is that the twin fin?
Yeah,
I saw that picture.
One of them. That wasn't the first one.
Okay,
but I just a subsequent board. But it would have been a twin fin because they were all twin fins back then.
Yeah, there was single fins and there was twin fins. It was before thrusters, and I just saw this photo of you with this twin fin, and it just looked so. I just went, oh my god, that's Grom. Oh right. Yeah. Okay, made your way to Swami's as a Grom with a twin fin.
Well, that was my dad taking us down there.
Cool.
He'd take us down. I got. Oh my gosh, I got a story about that time.
The Swami, like the
Jimbo.
whole...
Remember Pellegrin?
Pellegrande.
Okay, so I don't know if it was that day, but
oh my God, why?
This is
your grade?
He was
Jim Pellegrin.
A grade younger.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
and then Hans and I were in the same grade, but we didn't go to school together. Hans went to the Christian school, and at the time I think I was at Shore Cliffs.
Okay.
And so my dad took us down. He would drive us down, and we would surf Swami's, and he would leave us there. And then Hans was very meticulous. Right, so he had his towel all folded, and it was on the beach.
He's so classy.
And so then Jimbo goes in first, and Jimbo's got to take a crap, right? So,
oh no,
and so he does.
Him at that age was
okay, just a shrunken one. I got pictures of him. I can't find him.
God,
at the ranch. I don't know how I got him, but he was surfing these little waves at rights and lefts, and he had to be like 5 years old, but he just looked like
he was round,
like a rounder version, just smaller. So Hans gets out of the water, and he's just thinking, okay, I'm going to go to my towel, and then Hans is like, where's my towel? Where's my towel? And Jimbo's like,
Oh my God.
I kind of cry laughing every time, and it just was streaked.
What did he do?
He used it as toilet paper.
Shut up.
No, and poor. I wonder if Hans remembers this, but
He does.
He's
I could just say he does, because that's a moment in life when you wouldn't forget that your buddy, your supposed buddy, uses
So I don't remember the car ride back.
For your shit
I don't remember how the car
God,
ride back.
You know, that sounds. But the funny thing about Hans is, have you ever seen him that vibey? Like he's pretty mellow. Like he's the mellowest of the mellow,
totally
right?
mellow, yeah.
There's like.
But he was not happy that day.
But
he lost the chill that day.
But what I'm saying is, when Hans is not happy, he's just quiet. He's quietly unhappy.
Except for that day.
Really?
Yeah.
He got verbal?
He got verbal. Yeah. I don't remember.
I would pay to see a video of
was,
Hans getting verbal to Pellegrin for shitting in his towel or shoes in his shit to clean up.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, whatever that is. But let's go. Let's push forward. To. So we're Groms. You're just stoked on life.
Yeah.
But at one point, school's gonna, like, and then it's gonna be like, what am I doing with, right?
Yeah. So I think I like in my childhood growing up at Lost Winds, because that's where my surfing childhood was at Lost Winds in Rivie. That's where we were.
It doesn't get better.
No, because it was right down the hill.
Honest.
And
growing up at the pier, I can just tell you, running the beach my whole life.
Yeah.
I've always come by there and just went, man, this is a little Hawaii
nice,
down here. Compared to the pier, which was kind of back then, bikers. It
was edgy.
Just gnarly. Yeah. I
Not
loved
there,
it there.
Not
that
there.
was my jam.
Well, there was nobody at Lost Winds.
That's what I mean. There was no one there. And the people that were there were your boys.
Yeah.
And you guys were in the middle of nowhere, living the dream, bonfires and just anything.
Epic.
No one ever hassling. Just a dream.
And we wonder.
It was a dream.
And it's not like the wave was good. It was just closeouts.
But it has its moments.
It has its moments. But I remember, we'd be like, why are people coming down here? Like when they started coming down, like in high school, like this wave sucks. Like it's shitty. I mean, it got good at times.
Pretty girls went there.
Yeah. Well, then they start calling it Lost Winds, and then
I hated that.
Yeah, and then
I hated
we
that.
knew they weren't from there.
Exactly.
They said that.
When I heard someone's, and still to this day, like what's that shop over there? Lost Wind. I'm like, all these guys moved to Talega and think they want to be cool and call it Lost Winds. The second you say that, you just know you're a wannabe. But we know Lost Wind is a street, it's a beach, whatever. But go ahead. So anyway, you're at Lost Wind, Rivie, and that
so
whole
we were
crew.
just loose. We were loose.
Let me ask you this: when you were at that time, were say the Dean Reynolds and McGonagalls were like running it at Rivie?
So when at Lost Winds,
where were you in that?
So you had the McGonagalls.
Nice.
They were like much older than me.
Because they're in my okay.
But
so
Peter,
when you were
Peter was like Rivie, Ian, and then at Lost Winds it was like Dan Holt.
Oh, okay.
Ronnie Ankrum.
Right. Okay.
And,
did Dan Holt pass?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's really sad.
I heard about that. Yeah. So you guys had a Lost Wind crew that was
the hut. They had a hut there.
I remember that.
And it was just a cool place to grow up as a kid. And I mostly surfed with Gavin and Garth. So
right there.
Yeah.
Right there. And just two of the, and
we were always trying stuff with boards. Like I still remember, when in 6th grade at Concordia, I'd walk home from school, and my girlfriend was Nava Paskowitz, and so
come on,
and so we
wait, is she your grade?
Yeah, so we're the same grade.
So you decided of all the girls in school that you would date the one girl that had like 8 brothers.
Giant brothers. Yeah. And so then we'd go to their motorhome, and then
ballsy move, mister.
Yeah. And then I still remember all the tents and the brothers, and they would kind of emerge from the tents. And I'm just like and I remember having to buy surfboards because we're on the topic of surfboards.
Yes.
So I would appease, this is gonna work for you. And I'm like, Okay. And I'd have, Dad, I need some money. I remember like $40.
Yeah.
Bought this one stupid board. I think it was probably 6 foot, like purple and yellow with Paskowitz down the whole bottom.
I remember
just
those.
Giant. Yeah. And then this other one they called the Ace. It was, I'm not kidding, it was this thin, and it was a South Shore, and they said it was the best surfboard in the world. And of course, I don't know. Like I'm a 6, and plus when somebody giant's telling me it's, and I need to buy it, and it was broken.
So funny.
Like it was creased and busted already.
Do you remember any of the Paskowitz, for you, did you have like, was it, like Moses, Abraham, Jonathan, Israel, Adam, David?
Israel.
I mean, it goes crazy.
Yeah, Israel.
Who are you kind of with?
So a lot of Mo, Israel, and some David when I got older, Israel when I got older too. But Sigmund, like when I was younger, and then Joshua was like the youngest.
Okay.
And, you know, we would just be hanging out, and Sig was always drawing really bitchin' stuff. Like he would do these, like the comic books, the like moving comic. The guy was amazing.
Yeah.
He's such a
I just saw him the other day. And
really?
I just saw him the other day. And he's a prolific filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just done really well. Age of Adeline, I believe, is a movie he wrote.
I was freaking out when I saw his name on there. I'm like, what?
I went to the theater because I know he did it, and I was blown away how good it was.
And that movie was so good.
A-list
I love
movie.
that movie.
Absolutely A-list movie. Blake
Fantastic.
Lively, Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing, right? Yeah, he's got some new things in the works. I'm just really stoked for him. And then, just saw Joshua the other day as well at Sigmund's shop. I like to call him Salvador. I think he likes that. So Salvador's shop.
Sigmund is just the name when we were kids.
Yeah, I think he's really Salvador seems to be. I mean, even Joshua calls him Sally. You know, like I'm like, because I came by to see him, and then Joshua was in there doing a mural, and I'm like, you know, where's Salvador? And he's like, because this is something about me. I always like to say people's full names. You know, I have this thing. My mother called me Joseph. It's my whole life. People went, hey, Joe. I'm like, it's just not my thing. It's not my name. I don't like it. And then people know I don't like it, and they say it even more. So it's like a whole thing. Thank God for my nickname stuff, because then it's just kept the dream alive. Even in San Clemente High School, I went to the yearbook people and said, hey, can we just get it straight? In my senior yearbook picture, can it be Joseph? You know? And like, yeah, sure. And then it comes out as just still Joe. I'm like, whatever. But so when it's like the brothers, right?
Yeah.
I see them, I always say, you know, I grew up with Jonathan. Jonathan was in my grade, right? What a character.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Which one of them isn't a character, though?
Well, you know, I think really, if I want to say that, I think Salvador is the most
reserved.
Yeah, like he's still a character, but he just seems like he's got this different kind of practical, not trying so hard to be.
So I haven't seen Salvador, gosh, maybe since we were kids.
Yeah. Well, he really missed though, you know, and he ended up really focusing on what he was trying to make happen up in LA. I think he was just gone a lot. But I would say like Jonathan, Abraham. If I see Abraham, I say, what's up? Abraham, you know, like whatever. I'm just saying like, you know, all of them. Israel, a lot of people say Izzy, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah. I'm just saying I like to show reverence to the people that have full, really strong, especially biblical names. I'm not just going to turn them into Abe, you know. But anyway, what a classic family. So to
amazing family.
Amazing family. And to grow up with them, and I think all of us who really did grow up here within a certain 20-year period.
Everybody came across the path.
Yeah, because they were in the mix, you know.
Yeah.
So everyone's going to have those stories. But
and I learned a lot from just observing that and
their bohemian lifestyle.
Time. Yeah, so it's amazing.
It really is.
I still remember like going down one time in the motorhome at Sano and just surfing all day and being absolutely starved. And then Mrs. Paskowitz making something, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And like taking a bite and like literally gagging. I guess they call it gruel. And I didn't eat. Like I'm starting like
I'm
good. But it was probably really healthy.
Yeah,
Dorian made them eat it.
Yeah, but you know, it might have tasted a little bit more like
it was gnarly. I'd probably like it now.
Yeah,
but back then,
it was just,
back then, it wasn't a thing.
It's so funny.
It wasn't a thing. I was.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just just how many families have a full documentary about them? You know, it's just let's give reverence to the Paskowitz family.
Absolutely.
You know? And then and here we are today. So they're just so in our lives. You know, Joshua did my first production company, Primal Pictures. Joshua did the original art of the Blue-Eyed Lion.
Oh wow.
Okay. I've got a painting of his here in the house of Kelly Slater that's just phenomenal.
Well, they're just so talented. They're just every single one of them in their own way. Like it's phenomenal. And it was really like Dorian just allowed, like you just look at that petri dish of what you just let people kind of go into their skills, and they were all like well read.
Yes.
Very articulate.
Yeah. With a lot of craftiness, you know. They're real street, like smart but street, and with just not enough you can say. It's
so it resonated with me. Just like growing up as a rat, loose. Like I was loose. Like my mom was working, and so my brother and sister, we were just we did whatever we wanted, and sometimes it wasn't very smart, but we learned, and I'm here.
And speaking of that, let's move so as you start kind of jumping from like school days, groms to like, okay, where did you go after that? You know, as we approach adulthood and jobs, and because you've had a really unique, you know, of a lot of San Clementians, you know, I feel like your career trajectory has always been like, wow, that's like not everyone is a newsman and been in the, you know, service, just so many things you've done. So let's start a little bit like how did you go from Grom at the beach to what you've done in your life? You know,
still Grom at the beach.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I could have never looked at what I'm doing now and said, that's what I'm going to do someday. Like, oh, I'm going to be a fireman or a cop. I just was like, what every San Clemente kid that grows up surfing on the beach, I just want to surf. It's just like, okay, kid, you're going to be a bum. Like, I look at it, it's like, I should have been a bum. Like, I should have been under some underpass.
Because you wanted to surf so much.
Yeah. So like, literally, I still remember the week before graduation, I was walking up after surfing T Street, and I was walking home, and I was like, this overwhelming feeling came over me, and I was like, holy shit, I got to get a job. This summer is not a regular summer. That was the last one last year. This is like, I got to be like an adult, a 40-hour week. I didn't even know what that was. And I was working. I'd been working through high school because we were rats, right?
Sure.
If we want to
gotta make a little money.
If I asked my mom for money, she would laugh.
Yeah, so you had to go get your burger money.
We had to figure it out. So we were always working. It was never not working like that, but it was always like entrepreneurial kind of stuff. Like, I maybe worked at, you know, bus boy, this and that, but then there was other things that I would do to figure out how to make money. And so I was like I reflect now, and I was just, I think I mentioned to you, I was at a course I was teaching with the Navy SEALs in San Diego, and I was telling them, I have had to work so hard to not work my whole life. Like, that's how incredible. I got here.
Wait. That's just an incredible, that's like defining
but it's the
statement.
Truth. It's like, I worked so hard to not work and to surf. And somehow, like, through all of this, everything, and like my work now is, I can't tell the difference between what I want to do, because I totally enjoy what I do. I could never tell somebody, oh, go follow your passion, because, I mean, I'd like to, but the reality is, will that passion produce an income?
Yeah,
probably
it's a tough one.
And like, if you step back and look back, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to do that. But it was like, I was always like, and this is where I go back to like being like a rat as a kid, just figuring it out. Like you said, the Paskowitz are crafty.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I observed from them too. And I was like, oh, I'm a fellow rat, you know, and I think I'm going to learn from some of these things. These guys are like smart, and they figure stuff out.
They were just had to. And
you have to. And instead of like, you know, there's a lot of different like terrible ways that can manifest. But I think fortunately for me, providentially, I ended up, it was a good thing. I think a good thing for me.
It was
and
a good
thing for
influence on
society.
you, because it didn't lean toward the dark side.
Exactly.
It leaned toward the light side of, how can I create positive, how can I contribute to society in a way of my passion.
And that wasn't my intent.
Like, you just wanted to surf.
I just wanted to surf. No, it's pathetic. Like, it's so base. Like, it's so, like, I look at that, I go, what a dirtbag.
No, not at all.
But it's like
the best
somehow
thing to drive you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so so that kind of was the impetus, and it was like, you know, going through the oh shit moment, and then it was like, okay, well, I think I'm just going to go to Bali. So I went to Bali with Reynolds.
Dean Reynolds?
Yeah, because Dean was like, I always saw his pictures, and that was kind of like the thing. I always wanted, as a goofy foot, I always wanted to surf Uluwatu. And so I went down for a month, and I was down there with Jeff Kramer, and a local guy, Scott Clough. We all graduated.
I know Scotty.
Yeah, so we all graduated.
He just texted me the other day.
Did he really? Yeah. So we went down and surfed, and then I was working at Surf and Sand Hotel, and that was a whole different experience at a different
Laguna
level. Yeah, in Laguna Beach, and I got to see a lot of things. I was like, kind of, wow. I didn't even know that kind of world existed.
Sure. Laguna was many things.
Yeah, many things.
San Clemente really wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. So I was able to save a lot of money, and then I was able to travel. And so I was also at the same time, you know, like through my high school, like Surfline came out in 1985. It was 976 Surf. I started working for them a year later in 86 as a reporter trestles. So I was like learning about like the characteristics and getting interested at kind of a deeper level of like how the waves and near shore and forecasting works, just at kind of at that observations, like understanding like, oh, when you look at the waves, there's certain swell directions, wave periods, and they manifest different things. And that was at like kind of like a nucleus type level. I had no idea that it would lead to anything, but it was all about, really, I can go check out the waves and get $7. And that's all I thought about at the time.
Well,
but those were the
cool.
seeds.
$7 was actually worth $7
was.
back then,
Yeah.
when gas was under $1.
Right. So I do it twice a day.
And that would be 1 gallon of gas almost now.
Yeah.
It's like
and
crazy.
then
So
they
crazy.
paid you like a little bit for gas. But, you know, I look at it as I learned a lot, and it kind of pushed me to kind of figure more stuff out. And then Sean Collins started Wave Track in like 87. So then I
Okay.
started doing Wave Track. So then I was big time, because I was doing Surfline and Wave Track, because I saw him at 7-Eleven. And he's like, hey, you want to start doing reports for me? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing it for Surfline already.
And he didn't see that as a conflict of interest?
He didn't care, because
Yeah.
I already did it. And so
Yeah,
I was doing
perfect.
both of them. And so
Yeah.
now I was making big bucks. I still remember my girlfriend in high school. She's working for her parents and going off and doing an office job, one of those 8-hour things, my senior year, before I had that moment. And she's
One of
like,
those office
so
things.
pissed. She'd call me and she'd go, what are you doing? I'm
Checking
just
the
having
waves."
lunch right now. I'm going to take a nap and then go down and surf again. And then I have to work. I have to go check the waves. And she would get so pissed, because that's not work. And so, like, it's good. Her parents were like, probably, you need to dump this loser. Like, that probably
Sure.
was, yeah.
I think we all went through that a lot.
Yeah, and so that was good for her, because I was still in my that kind of phase, and so it's just like, and then it was Saddleback College.
Okay, so you went to Saddleback. You were already working for Wave Track and Surfline. And when you went to
This
Saddleback,
is in the late
what did you-
80s.
Okay, and what did you choose to study at Saddleback?
I was studying broadcast,
Nice.
and I was studying geosciences.
Interesting.
So like
Okay.
weather. So I was trying to get a little background on weather, and I was also trying to compete on the Bud Tour.
Okay.
So I was doing all of that
PSAA?
stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I befriended this guy on a cultural exchange.
And that was in like late 80s?
Yeah, 89.
Yeah, so that was right in that
88,
era
89.
when Jimmy Hogan, Pinkerton, just the whole Steve Ward. I mean,
everybody
Dino was U.S. champ and PSA champ in 1990. Shane, I believe, 92. Parsons 91. I mean, that's how it split
Yeah.
up. So you were kind of in that group.
Yeah, in the late 80s, and then when I did this cultural exchange, I met this guy, Gary Robbins. He was the editor of the Register Science. He was the science editor and education editor.
Interesting.
And so then he knew, and then I did some broadcast stuff down there in the Cook Islands. So I was doing little broadcast stuff. And in the college, I was the host on Lifestyles, the show, and I was doing a lot of.
And Lifestyles, the show was like on local cable?
Yeah, it was on local cable. So I was doing some of that. And again, all of this was like, I want to get it, because I was doing like all kinds of like random stuff I was surfing for OP, but then I was always trying to do all these little things for just money, like money to surf, right?
Yeah.
And the stuff on camera paid,
Anything
paid
but a
more.
9-to-5 gig.
Anything but a 9-to-5 gig. So it paid more. Like the
Yeah.
on-camera stuff paid more. So then I was pursuing all that. And so then this guy, Gary, was telling me, because he was affiliated with the Register, and the company that owned the Register was starting this 24-hour news channel. He goes, you should send a tape in and try and get a job at this Orange County news channel. I'm like, okay. So I send a tape in, and of course I get the rejection letter. Like they're hiring real professionals, right? Like honestly, that's what they were hiring, real professionals. It was like, at the time, it was like the most technologically advanced news channel in the country, like robotic cameras and all things like that. And so they were not going to hire some dude. So then it goes back into, I go, hey man, they rejected me. He goes, okay, well, I'm going to have it. He was like super gnarly, and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. And he helps me with the demographics. Like, all right, there's 100,000 surfers in Orange County, whatever the numbers were, and there's 1 million potential beachgoers, and then there is like X amount of boaters, and I got this whole list that he provided, all these demographics, because he's a reporter and does all this stuff. And then he gets me an interview with the news director, and so then I go in and I go, I'm 20 years old. I'd be the weather boy, right? And I'm like,
not the weatherman.
No, I was the weather boy. And all I wanted to do was not really work. right? Because I figured that was an avenue. And so I go in, I sit down with the guy, and his name was Ken Tiven, and he was it was a longtime veteran at CNN. And so he was the news director at the time.
And he's the news director
at
OCN?
No, he was. So he might have been he might have been the GM at the time. He was the GM, and then the news director was a guy named Ed Casascia, and he was from the Bay Area. Really nice guy. These guys were amazing people. And so I sat down with them and I said, "Hey, look, I know you're not planning on doing a weather for." I knew that because Gary filled me in. So they were going to have like AccuWeather, just like sort of like the Weather Channel has, where it's the automated thing.
Yeah.
Because everything was automated except for the people delivering the news. It was 24 hours, so it's like you got to fill content in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so their plan wasn't to have a person giving the weather, because they were like, there's no weather in Southern California, right? You know, that kind of idea.
Sure.
So I'm like, hey, instead of like just weather, let's focus on what matters for these different groups: surfers, divers, fishermen.
Oh,
and they were
smart.
like, this is interesting. And again, I can't take all the credit for this. It's my
smart,
friend Gary,
you know?
who's like teased me off with this stuff. And they called me back and they said, we're going to put you on. And I'm like, first it was like, great. And then it was holy crap. And then, you know,
was that like a daily gig or a weekly
yeah,
gig?
so it hadn't even aired yet at the time. This was they were going to launch.
It was in concept.
It was, everything was being built and it was going to launch in September. I think I got hired in May. So it was like I started driving up and we were training, doing mock stuff for like, I don't know, what is that, 3 or 4 months. And then finally it went live. But like leading up to that, like I was never like in high school. I never raised my hand. Like if I didn't understand something in class, I just would sit there and go
quiet
and just like, oh, I don't know what the hell this is. And I would ask someone, or I'd go ask the teacher after, because I just was not like in front of people person. I was always like prankster in the background.
Okay.
Like prank phone calls, you know, and that was, it got me, it's like, I just was good at it. Right. And, I had all kinds of voices. I had all kinds of voices. And back then there wasn't caller ID. So it was cool. So it was like, I go to people's houses, I go, here's my Rolodex, and make some phone calls. And so it's like, so when I got into the TV thing, they were all audio tapes back then. So I had to get all those, and I had them all. They were just at friends' houses and stuff. I had to get them all, and I put them in a lockbox because of the morality clause in my contract.
Yeah,
because I didn't want that stuff coming out.
And it could kind of shut your gig.
It would totally shut my gig. It would have totally shut my gig. And so like it was just, we just did that. We get home from whatever, you know, before I started doing the TV. I still did it while I was doing the TV thing. I couldn't help it. But that was when people would come into town, like when the guys from Hawaii would come into town, like Chesser and you know, whoever, and they'd hey, make some phone calls. And we let's call Pat O'Connell or whoever, and just mess with people. And so then it was like, that was before the TV thing, and then I'm surfing for OP, and Bonnie Creel, who was the director of marketing or something, she was the head person, and she's like, Charlie, we want you to announce the OP Pro. I'm like terrified,
wow,
like in front
that's
of people.
A big gig.
That's
and I'm thinking that was 82.
That was 80. 89.
Oh, 89. Okay.
89.
Because there was one a long time ago with Curran. I think that was at like churches, but
so that was the OP Surf Shop Challenge.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, so the OP Pro at Huntington Beach.
Oh, the
huge one. Yeah, so I'm like, I have to do it
Shane
because
Horan type.
Yeah, it was huge, and so
like that era.
So I'm like, I had to say yes, and I was terrified, but I was like, yes, I'll do it. And then Mike Beshin, like, must have heard. I think I might have told him that. And he goes, hey, I'm putting on the U.S. Championships at Oceanside. Do you want to announce it this weekend? It was before the OP, so I'm like, man, maybe I should get some practice, figure this stuff out. It was with Chris Morrow. And I announced that.
Wow.
And we had an absolute blast, but we didn't know that we were having a blast at the expense of the bodyboarders. And so like Mike gets a letter after from Maury Boogie, and he says, never again will we ever sponsor an event that Charlie Fox and Chris Morrow are announcing.
Which is kind of cool. I
thought it was kind of cool. I wish cool. Mike, maybe he has the letter. I'd love to.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to see it, because, you know, in a way it's like, especially
But we were just having fun.
But I mean, it was always such a weird thing, because a lot of our buddies boogie boarded, not a lot, but a few, you know, Cameron Steele, for instance. You know, he's very successful at it. Keith Sasaki, some of these guys around. It was kind of a thing. Because when I grew up, there was not boogie boards. There was belly boards.
There was like a burst of it, and they were making money. They were on the U.S. tour.
And it was always a little bit like, wow, okay, well, whatever. But
good for them.
It was just, good for them. But at the same time, we didn't really like competing with, like when they showed up on the scene, and all of a sudden, you know, at the time I was living in Maui, and there was no boogie. There was just nothing.
And then poof, it happened, huh?
Yeah, because you just paddle out the first day and get barreled. I mean, it's not you don't have to spend so long learning how to get to your feet. You know, the whole thing is so. You know, nothing but, you know, now I think we've evolved to the point where there's so many different versions of riding waves that we don't get so personal around that. But I'm just saying, thinking back then, going,
it's a different context.
Maury Boogie's going, hey, you guys, you know, we don't want any part of that. I would think in a lot of ways that would be like a badge of honor, you know? Okay. That's just my take on it. Maybe that's not true, but, you know, maybe those guys would be pissed, want to beat me up. But all I'm saying is they always fought for their place in the lineup, but it was always very difficult for us to give up a wave because we just always felt like, God, just get away. They got fins. It's just their.
Well, I think blackball was the most painful.
Definitely.
At T Street, you know, like it's firing, and all of a sudden they're yelling you in, and then
they get to win.
Yeah, so that was the hard part. Like and you know what's interesting is
that's true.
Huntington Beach stopped doing their blackball. I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that.
At all?
Yeah, on the
Huntington Beach.
So I was talking to the head lifeguard, and I'm at the time, I don't know if they started again, but he said that they saw no difference in the
danger. It's the same. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's kind of tough to think about in the middle of summer with millions of tourists from 909. Okay, just all these people with like tents and barbecues and football. You know,
at least
crazy.
We got where Groms would get our beach house.
Intersecting with each other with hard surfboards, and it does seem a little more dangerous to me. But cool
remember, remember we could surf beach house originally.
Yeah.
And then they took
that away too. Yeah. The whole thing, just get out of here.
Poof.
Right.
It was in that kind of context but anyway, that's kind of where that whole broadcast thing really got fuel for me because I started doing that. I'm like, it was good money. Like the money from OP and I did that for 5 years.
To announce their contests?
Yeah, while I was doing the TV thing, I was still doing all these kind of side jobs, and I was building that up and getting sponsors because, you know, as a rat, I knew I had to like
hook this with that
I had to make sure this thing sustained because now I'm like,
you're in the mix.
I got a lifestyle and I'm living on a boat in Dana Point Harbor.
And I can't go get a real, you know, we're not calling
there's
it, you know,
there's
9
no
to 5
option for a real job.
No option for that because that'll take away the time that allows me to pursue these pursuits that allow me to surf, get paid well, and do what I love to do. I mean, and I feel like as I've ever known you, I've always kind of felt like you walked with that. You have it in your eyes like a man who's doing what he loves to do, you know, and that's really awesome to see. Because growing up here, we also know people that, you know, might have done different things, and I don't want to name any of them as bad things to do. It's just they were like jobs that made you not be at the beach all day. Or be able to have the freedom to go, oh my God, it's 6 foot on Tuesday at 2:00. Like I want to be able to go when it's good because we know it's not a basketball court. I mean, you don't get to just go play hoop anytime you want. When the waves are good, you got to have freedom.
Yeah. And so like when I started that OCN job, they were paying me $200 a week, but I was like, doesn't matter.
I know, but back then $200 a week was like, you know,
it was a little bit. I don't know.
A lot of money, man. It's a lot more than that. I think it's even more than that.
I don't know.
Whatever it is, but gas has tripped. I'm just saying everything rent when you think about
everything, but it wasn't a ton of money. It wasn't about the money. And then I remember a year later, I went in and I was like, hey, you know, because I got sponsorships, I got like people to sponsor my weather piece.
Yeah.
And it was super successful. It was one of the most popular things on the channel because it was unique. It just was different, you know?
Well, plus, too, looking at from a sponsorship point of view, you're like, you got guys that go ride waves and do all that or whatever. But this guy's bringing, you know, a unique exposure to the table, right?
Yeah, it was completely different. And
it's pretty cool.
When I sat down with them to talk about a raise, I told them what I was making. They were like, holy shit, here, we're going to fix this. And so then I got a real salary. So I was like, but had I done that in the very beginning, said, no, I'm only going to work for this.
No, you wouldn't have got the gig.
I wouldn't have got
the
gig.
Would have started,
I was like, I'd do this for free. Yep. Somehow I would do this for free.
Yes.
I would just do all my little things on the side just to make it work.
Because it would be the conduit that would bring everything together as you look back.
I would hope. You know, now I look back, it's all easier looking back. Like I know if like my kids and I don't know how to to duplicate, to say, oh, do this, do that, because there's no such thing as that. It's like,
No.
you're
There's
gonna
no
have to
college
grind.
course.
You got to grind. Like your
Yeah.
20s and 30s, it's grind time.
Just get out there and
Yeah.
get in the mix.
Yeah.
What was next? You know, where did that feed into next? If you look
So-
at your news thing and then go to
Like when I was doing this news thing, I was aggressively studying, trying to not look like an idiot on air. You know, I was studying meteorology. I was going through different programs, like I went through a physical science program at Saddleback, and then I went through an operational broadcast meteorology program through Mississippi State, through a distance program through Saddleback.
okay.
And so I was continuously studying. I was getting all of these technical manuals from the Coastal Weather Service offices you could get back then. They were physical, they were free, you could get them. And basically they were forecasting manuals, how to forecast different things. And it was
Okay.
like forecasters learning from different, so I was like honing my craft and really, really getting good at this and understanding it more fully, not just at a cerebral academic level like that you learn in school, but in a very practical level. Like, how do you, like, people can talk about waves, but can you actually forecast, predict them? And so it was just fascinating to me, and again, selfishly, because I'm trying to determine where to go. And okay, maybe I'm not going to go there because I know it's going to be best. I'm not going to lowers, no thanks. But I'm going to find like somewhere that's like not as good, but it might be just me and a couple guys. So,
Yes.
and then traveling and then going to different places and like hooking up trips of like, okay, I've got these weather watchers. Okay, I've got these weather watchers at the TV station, right, that call in weather. Like, all right, well, how can I set something up where we can go like to Mexico and we bring the weather
call it work.
watchers and it's work and I'm getting paid. And so then we did that a couple times. So I'd set
Cool.
these trips up and offer it to my weather watchers. And, you know, at the time I was engaged. I think I was married. Yeah. So I just gotten married. And so I met my wife. She's from South Dakota. She still can't understand me. She won't ever. But
You've been married how long?
it's 30 years in May.
And she's still
She's
trying
still
to work it out.
She's still trying to sort
This
things out.
Freak show.
Yeah, total
Just
freak show.
wants to
Yeah,
just
total
like-
freak show.
But it's got to be
No,
stimulating
it's
for
yeah,
you,
it's,
know,
it's stimulating. Definitely stimulating for her. Like in like
she just
know.
no clue what to be
yeah,
with a
medicated
surfer's
way.
like.
You know. So like I'm living on my boat in Dana Point Harbor. Because that was a hookup, right? I go to
Totally.
a boat show,
Come on.
and I'm like, oh yeah, I work on. Hey, yeah, I do
Boom.
this, and can you give me a
Bing.
deal? You know, really conflict
Hello.
of interest. You know, as like a surfer, you didn't understand conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I didn't read that part of the contract.
Me neither.
So
Thank God.
So I got like this really good price on this very nice new boat, and I was living on this boat, and she worked at Beach City's Pizza, and so I'd ride my bike over all the time.
Okay.
And I would eat, and then finally took her out on a date, and then we got married. And so, you know, she'd come along these trips with me, and then
Has she ever picked up on being in the water at all?
So she says I ruined it for her because, like, I'm the worst
Teacher.
teacher of
You're over
surfing
it. You just wanna go
because pretty much. So like, she explains it, and then my son observed it because he does surf coaching. Like just last year, I'm with a group of SEALs, and we had a couple. It was a guy that I work with a lot, and we've done deployments together and everything. And we're surfing church, and there was a couple guys that had never surfed before, and so they were part of this group. And then I just tell them before they go out, I get them a softboard, and I'm like, okay,
Have fun.
yeah, I'm like, okay, just jump right up, just give them a quick lesson. I go, it's going to be abusive. There's no way around this. Like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
just,
true, yeah.
it's just like, there's no like,
Jump in.
yeah, and just keep getting abused. And so my son paddles up, Elijah, and I'm sitting with my buddy Johnny, and we're sitting there up at the point, you know, where the waves are. And we got the guys down in the bay where it's dumping, right? And Elijah goes, hey, Dad, are you teaching those guys how to surf? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you suck. I go, I know.
Yeah,
So my
'cause it's
wife,
not
going
your
back
thing,
to my
yeah.
wife, so like, remember Castleton, Tommy?
Of course.
So we went and visited Tommy when my oldest Chuck was 10 months, and he had the surf school in Lahaina.
Yep.
And so then,
And he's been on Maui for a long time. now,
yeah, and so my wife, he took her out on the softboard and pushed her into waves. And so, okay, it's 82 degree Maui
Oh, yeah,
water,
yeah.
and she's riding these waves all the way in.
Where, like Mall of Wharf or something?
It was, whatever on the other side of the harbor, Lahaina Harbor, I think, on the other side.
Breakwall.
Breakwall, they call it? Okay. And then I took my son out, and I got pictures of him, like I'm holding him up at 10 months, and my wife is just freaking out, like you can hear her on the thing. Like, don't drop him, and he's all slippery, 10 months, I'm standing him up.
there's those waves have reefs, you know?
Yeah, it was tiny little waves. But
Small.
anyway, so then I try and get her out at Sano, and then I do my same method that I did with these other guys, because I didn't want to jump in the water. I think it was cold. I think I put her in a wetsuit, and she's just cold when she touches the water, and she's just like, we'll still bring that up to this day. You sent me out there all by myself, and you just told me what to do. And I'm like, yeah, I suck. But I wasn't surfing, so I was sitting on the beach.
It's fair to say that out of all these career trajectories you've had, one of them wasn't surf instructor.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My neighbor across the street asked me, he goes, hey, I saw you at Uppers the other day. Do you think you do some coaching for me? I go, look, let me just tell you right now. I suck. I'm a terrible coach.
At surf.
I am the worst.
Because when you
I'll go surfing with you.
Surf,
I'll go surfing with you.
But I'm not going to teach you.
Yeah, I go because it's not going to work.
It's just not my thing.
Yeah, I'm not good at it.
So if we're going through that, and because what I understand is that somewhere along the line you ended up in the military.
Yeah. So.
Right.
So okay. So I'm at OCN. I'm having a great time. It's a great career. Everything is going positive. Future trajectory, and I'm staring at my next stop is LA market, right? Because Orange County is considered a major market, but it's considered like a top 50 market. LA is number 2 market.
Yeah, it's regional compared to really national.
And so my next step is LA, and I'm just like, if I start in LA, I don't know if I can get off this. I think that it's going to be just too hard to do my kind of like bohemian lifestyle, right?
Surf.
Like it's surf and
they pay you, I imagine.
Yeah, and the pay would have been
a whole
like
different
whole different deal. And how do you? So I didn't want to make that a decision in my life. So we started planning. I started planning. I bought this Westfalia, started tricking it out, and then I give my notice at the TV station. So I'd been there about, 7.5 years or so, almost 8 years.
Good gig.
It was a great gig. It was amazing. People were phenomenal. I learned so much.
All respect, just time for a new chapter at that point.
And they couldn't believe it. They go,
yeah, why would you give up this gig?
Well, and he's like, wait, you got 3 months? Because I had to do it within 90 days of the end of the contract. So I gave him two weeks.
Oh.
And I'm like, I just need, because the guy at the time, the news director, was kind of a jackass. He was like throwing chairs and all kinds of stuff. And I was just over. He was telling me to like hype up hurricanes. And I remember he's like, there was a hurricane that the models had, I think like on the 5 days as it curving into Southern California. He wanted me to say, hurricane's coming. And I'm like, I'm not doing that, because like I know these people.
Yeah.
It's just, how it is. And
he
got so pissed. He was not happy with that.
And so you guys were getting to a point where it was going to be a mutual thing to
well, he had his executive producer. I still remember him. I was like overhearing him, and I go, hey, where is so-and-so? And he said, oh, she's at home. She'll have a nervous breakdown and then she'll be fine. And I'm like, okay. So then I give him the notice, and he's like, oh, so you'll stay to the end of the contract? No, 2 weeks. I'm out. I'm going to Puerto Rico in 2 weeks, because my mom was living in Puerto Rico at the time.
What part of Puerto Rico?
She was in the forest, forest area. Yeah. And so then we went, and we left, and then we went down there, and then we got in the Westfalia and went to Puerto Escondido. We're going to go help with a mission down there, and I didn't have any like endpoint. There wasn't like, oh, we're going to go do this for 3 months.
Yeah,
then it was just like, we're done. I'd saved up money. We're going to go. Yeah. So then we were down there for, 4 months. And
there's kids at this point?
My first, Chuck. He was almost 2.
Okay.
And everybody thinks we're crazy.
So you and your wife and your first son jump in the Westfalia and just head south.
Yeah, everybody was like, you're freaking nuts, dude. Yeah. You left a good job. Like, why would you do this? No, it's one of those. Yeah. It's one of those things.
It's one of those moments in life.
Like I did in the back of the truck with Moses.
Yeah.
So but this one worked out. Yeah. So I was in the back of the truck. I was ditching school. I was in 8th grade. I was in Roy's truck, Gonzalez, and we pulled up to go to Moses. I knew Moses, right? I knew him, and his board was right there, and it was like a really soft glass job. And I don't know why I'm sitting in the back of the truck, and there was a pen, and I just started going like this. I don't know why I did this. I still don't know why. I'm still seeing like my hand in the pen and it going so easily into the board.
Which is a trip, right? Because back then a lot of glass jobs were pretty thick.
His was super thin because it was a lightweight. Right. And he comes out and he goes, what the fuck?
And I'm thinking it.
And I'm looking up like
he's about what age? Like.
Oh, he was
you guys
huge.
Are like. He's already.
No, I was probably. I don't know. What is that? 12 or 13? And he was huge. He was 20.
And he's your. Oh, Moses is way older than you.
Yeah.
Oh, so when you were 12, he was 20.
Something like that.
Oh my God!
No, he was a massive,
full-grown monster.
He was a monster.
Incredible.
Like this. And
the nicest,
nicest. Just, not today, not that day. So like he looks at me, and then I'm like, and I'm thinking in my head,
20
like,
holes in his board.
Not that many, like maybe 5 or 6.
5 or 6
doesn't
holes.
Like, and it's like,
wow.
Why I did that, I don't know. Like I'm not a destructive person. I don't know. It just was like, I don't know. I'm just sitting in the back of the truck.
Oh my God!
Totally stupid. So all I remember is like, I still remember his hand grabbing the front of my hair, and just going. I don't know, 5 or 6 times, maybe for each hole.
Wow.
Slammed on the back of Roy's truck, and then he was done.
It was all good.
It was good. And then we went down to Swami's, and it was like closing out.
Obviously, he had another board.
Yeah, obviously. I still don't know why I did that. So anyway, I don't know where that.
So no, let's get.
It's like a different decision.
Out of the way, right?
Different decision. Yeah. Like so, then this decision to leave, go to Mexico, and then we met some people down there, and decided, hey, we're going to try out Kawaii. So then we get up, we go, it was like, I don't know, 4 months later after the Mexico road trip. And we rented a house down there right on the beach in Puerto Escondido. And it was a lot of fun, got good waves. And then shipped the Westfalia to Kawaii. I think all of our stuff was already gone. We got rid of it before we went to Mexico. So all we had was the Westfalia and what we could take,
fit in it.
Yeah, what we could take
cool.
in our suitcases, and we might have mailed a few things over. And we had no plans, and we found a place for a few days, and then we found a little ohana that we rented for a few months. And I still remember right when we got there, we went into the little supermarket in Koloa, and I bought I had the single bag of groceries.
Yeah, for so
$50
much
bucks, and I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah,
what am I going to do? I didn't have a job. I didn't.
Yeah, how am I going to keep my money?
Yeah, so I ended up getting a job as an ocean kayak tour guide. Along the Pali coast,
cool.
and that was a lot of fun with Outfitters Kawaii. So I did that, but then I also at the same time luckily got a job as a science and math teacher at a private Catholic high school.
On Kawaii?
On Kawaii.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and the same thing, like the guy that hired me, he was a classic, and he had this totally nonlinear mindset too. Like he should have hired a real teacher. He said
someone was certified in teaching.
Yeah, he had been a teacher for 2 decades, and he was from Colorado, and he was out there. He goes, hey, Charlie, I just should tell you why I hired you. He goes, I had so many qualified people, but they come in there with their stained old yellow papers. He goes, I just want you to get these kids excited. I'm like,
cool.
Well, I just hope I can do it, because I was, meteorologist, a
TV
guy. So anyway, stacked with chemistry and physics and all this kind of crap and algebra. So I was one step ahead of him every day. I can't tell you how hard I was studying to do that. But he was amazing because I remember after class one day, it was 20 minutes after school ended, and he comes in, he goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm just getting ready. He goes, get out of here. I need you happy tomorrow. So the guy, I learned a lot of good leadership, and I had good leaders at OCN too, that there were some bad ones, but mostly good ones that were about empowering and kind of refining people's
keeping your energy
positives.
Right, keeping it positive, learning.
Because they understood what the
out of the
end
box
goal
idea,
was.
Kind of
out of the box.
Yeah,
fully out of the box. And so, that was just really good for me to kind of learn that overall. And so then at the same time, I had a couple other teachers that their husband, one of them was the commanding officer of the cutter of the U.S. Coast Guard there in Naui.
Okay.
And they were always at the get-togethers and stuff. They're always trying to get me to go in because of my weather background. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. Because I grew up in San Clemente. We did. It's the Marines here, as kids, were like, nah, I'm never joining the military. My dad was a naval officer. I was like, thanks, but no thanks.
It does.
There's
had enough of that around us that it made us probably not want that. Yeah.
Flipping way I'm ever joining the military.
No romance in it.
No.
Whatsoever.
And so then they keep pestering me, and then finally the guy goes, this is several, parties later, barbecues. He's like, we load the boat up with food. This is pre 9/11. And then we just travel the islands. You could bring your board. I'm like, what?
Bing.
Bing. Same, hits that bass chord.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I was like, sign me up. So then I joined. So I was a reservist, but then I'd go in and out of
reservist
active duty in the Coast Guard. In the Coast Guard. And then that was my
That's
like
the picture
softening.
that we have of you, like, and you were standing next to someone. You guys got a
That's
white
when I got my
uniform on?
commission.
That's the white, that's the Coast Guard
That
uniform?
was the Navy.
Oh, that was
so
the
I got my
Navy.
commission as an oceanographer in '05. And so I got softened to the military.
Through Coast Guard.
Through the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
because once it was 9/11, then everything changed. Then we weren't packed. Well, we still had our boards, and thankfully there was one of the chiefs on the boat that surfed, so we'd go drop into Maui, and so it was true.
It's like a sequel to Apocalypse Now.
It
or
was
something,
it was a blast.
That sounds really
It
cool.
was rad, and so then that softened me up to where I could
open your mind
join
up
the
to
real
think
military,
about,
like the Navy or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that happened in '05.
Okay, so 20 years ago you joined the Navy. Or
So-
was that the start of the Coast Guard gig?
So Coast Guard was 2000.
Oh, okay. So 5 years the Coast Guard, then you go to the Navy in 2005.
2005.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
This trip is 2025. I'm just so
Yeah. And I
mystified
retired
by
in 21. So I actually retired from the Navy, which is crazy. As
How
a
cool.
naval
Yeah,
officer, I
crazy.
laugh when I say
Incredible.
like they made me a naval officer.
Incredible.
It's ridiculous.
I know it's just
It's
that's what I was
ridiculous,
saying at
man.
the start of the show. I mean,
No, it's ridiculous.
Not that many, no other San Clementians that I know that really have. I mean, we know a lot of people who've done a lot of interesting things, right? We're a
Yeah.
pretty unique culture, but your career trajectory would be something that would be talked about.
And I
people
had
have
to
always
work.
Been pretty. I gotta say, really, myself included, really impressed by. You hear things, you're like, wow. I mean, not everyone pulls that off.
It's
what
all
I mean?
it's pulling it off by dumb
All
luck.
with the raw essence of needing to surf, and your statement of I had to work so hard to not work.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
and
it's
I
just-
wasn't
it's like
thinking about that at the time. That's like a reflection.
Yeah, it's
Like, I reflect on that. Man, I had to work really
the
hard.
base
Yeah.
of your whole decision-making process is whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah.
For all of us, it's kind of like. But then, of course, like we were talking earlier, that could go many different directions.
Oh yeah, can go many different directions.
But those directions that you
I
took,
just
I gotta
was-
say, are very
I
respectful.
was preserved.
Bringing a lot of, I want to say, bringing to society benefit. Working within the system to still have your freedom, but then at the same time to be able to perform a function that, is really respectable.
It is, and
Yeah.
I want to say that was not my intent. Like
Okay, prankster.
yeah, I know I'm so happy about it because I can look at that and go, wow, this is really unique and pretty cool. And it's just like that. Like, for example, so I get my commission, and because of my background in wave forecasting, marine meteorology, and just this emphasis on the nearshore, I get pulled into naval special warfare, into supporting the SEALs. So at the time, the forecasters were pulled out of the regular Navy weather program to support the SEAL program, but they had no training. They had it's a very unique thing, and
Very
so they had
specialized thing. Yeah.
general weather, winds and seas is how I describe it. And so then I came in at that time, and I got mobilized to active duty, went out to Hawaii, back to Hawaii, because I was temporarily. That's when I took that. My agent got me the job at Charlotte. I was working for Fox, and
Charlie Fox is in Charlotte working for Fox.
It was so much fun, but I realized at the time a couple things. I don't really like weather that much, because I was doing true weather.
Sure.
Plus the ocean was on the other side. I could never figure that out. It took me a while.
Because it's on the East Coast.
It's on the other side, and like with the
a
chroma
different
key
thing,
and everything, and you're standing in front of this green screen, and you're like, because you're
wow.
looking, and I didn't like it. Plus, I miscalculated. On the map, it looked 2 hours to get to the ocean. Well, it turns out because they're 2-lane roads, it was 5 hours. So I remember chasing a hurricane the first month I was there.
What town were you in?
So we moved to a little town called Tega Cay, which is about
Okay.
20 minutes out of Charlotte in South Carolina.
Okay.
And I was on a lake. I thought, okay, I could pacify myself. I can kayak. I can run. I can do all this stuff to try and suppress the drug of surfing.
The
right?
surf drug.
I was wrong. So I still remember the first hurricane chase. We went out to Charleston.
Okay.
Drove like 5 hours. I get out there and it
It's like
sucks.
driving to freaking Stinson
No, it was insane.
Beach or
And it was
something.
so bad. It was like I wanted to cry. And I'm like with my wife
Oh, you mean
and
the
kids.
wave quality?
Oh, it was so bad. And I paddled out, and it wasn't
Just
even like
jump.
surfing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, drove back. And I don't know how this is
It
gonna work.
just can't work out.
This is starting to rumble. This is the first month. And then
So within 1 month, it was just already
it
like,
was starting to crumble, right? And then I was already having some just weirdness because like I'm not into the urban thing. Like everybody's like because when you're on camera and you're really developing a relationship with the person on the other side of the camera, right? And I couldn't relate because I'm like in bed by 9. I go to bed early, get up early, and I want to go surf and do something. Well, these people are going out partying. And it's like,
totally
it's just a different
culture,
thing. I'm not used to it, right? So like this person I'm talking through the camera, it's just not my person.
Right. You weren't going to be able to connect because it just wasn't your environment.
And it wasn't, in the way I kind of look back on it, it wasn't purpose weather. It was like, it's going to be 85 degrees today. Who cares if it's 83, it's 85, or if it's
super muggy,
sunny, or this, or partly cloudy. So I realized I didn't really like it that much weather. I like purpose weather. So that's what resonated, like
more
with the
weathery
military.
Weather. Right?
Yeah, like if you're surf forecasting for surfers, there's a purpose behind it.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You know, or like a boater, what are the sea conditions like? And and fog and all those other kinds of things. So it's purpose.
You're just basically talking to society going, tomorrow it'll be 85.
It's just weather.
And 4 days later it'll be 83.
It's like looking on your app. It's like, look, you don't need me.
You don't need me.
I'm going to go home, check the app.
Just check.
Yeah, and so that was all kind of going in the backdrop of starting, and then what really just tipped it is I was still forecasting for Surfline at the time. I was forecasting just an area remotely. I forget where it was. I think it was the Gulf in Hawaii. I was doing that, and so I was part of that in that whole circle. And so Kurt Corte, who's the East Coast, he's a manager of something. He runs the East Coast now, I think. He was at school doing his graduate degree in North Carolina, and so he's like, "Hey, let's go chase this hurricane." And I'm like, yeah, we're on it. So then we went to the Outer Banks, and then we met up, and then we drove together and stayed at his friend's house. And it was dark when we got there. And I remember walking out in the morning, and it was humid, and I could smell the ocean. And I now know, I think, what a crackhead feels like. Because when I smelled the sea air, I was just like, I'm done. Like I knew I was finished. So then we surfed, and I called my agent on the drive home, and I'm like, "Hey, dude, I'm done."
And he goes,
"I thought you were gonna last 6 months, Charlie." I'm like, "Mm-mm." And this was 2 months. This was 2 months in, and maybe almost 2 months. And then I go back, and thankfully at the same time, I was getting my commission in the Navy. It came through because I was waiting, because it's not like you just get a commission. It's like I had to go through all the full steps. Presidential kind of, they do all of the whatever congressional has to appoint officers. So I get word that, and then I was like, okay, I can break this contract.
Well, now you can break the contract
sort of
legally,
I still owe a bunch of money because they just flew me and moved all of our household goods out there, and I'm breaking a 3-year contract. And so I can legally do it but they go, okay, but you got to pay us this. Yeah. And so then it was like because I gave them 2 months. I was like, hey, I'm out of here in 2 months. I can't do this anymore. And then it was difficult, right? And my wife she's so pissed. She's just like, you and your surfing thing.
I could see where that would.
And she was right. She's right. But I was like, hey, look,
it's just
I am like an alcoholic at AA. It's like, I am a crack addict at surfing. I can't help it. It's like, and I fully realized that, like, I was kayaking every single day. I was running until my eyes were bulging and it was like, it didn't go away. Like there was something about the sea air. So anyway, I was able to like cut him a little check and get out of there. And so then I went back to working with Surfline, and then I got mobilized to go out to Hawaii. And that's what kind of started my whole like next phase. Is I go out to Hawaii to the SEAL team to set up this command of forecasters to support the SEALs. And so then I get out there, and I'm, quickly gravitating towards operators that surf. And so then I start doing this thing we called METOC story. METOC is meteorology and oceanography. So I send out this command surf forecast, and then it went like naval special warfare wide, because people are like, oh yeah, we got to add this person. And so it was like kind of marketing to show like, hey, this kind of stuff can be done. Like this, because I realized, I was like, oh man, these guys are screwed. Like the level of detail, even though you have this phenomenal brain power at naval oceanography, everything that we have basically in the private sector, think of any kind of forecasting for the ocean, it got its start from some funding through the Navy somehow. And then it gets turned over into the private sector. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's there at your disposal. But you got basically this chasm between that and the end user. And so now we got these forecasters that are generalists, basically, good forecasters, but they're not. So I was like, okay, I got to start training these guys, but at the same time, I got to prove this concept. So I was able to get, onto submarines and deployments and all kinds of stuff, proving the concept. And then it was like, starting to train the forecasters. And then it was like, okay, well, now let's develop this program for the operators, predicting and exploiting. And so for the last 20 years, I've been doing that. So like you got overseas projection where you have just imagery and wave patterns. And it's like, how do you make sense of that? How do you get to a level of detail where it's not just like a surf forecast. It's like you're
much
talking
more specialized.
We need to know about currents, because we need to know about, hey, if you're moving in this way, use this current that should be here because of this reason. And so developing all of that, and that's where these cards came from.
Oh, cool. Let me see.
Yeah. So like one of the groups, this card came from a very very special group that's deep within the Navy. And the guy says to me, he says, "Hey, Charlie," he goes, "we need you to develop a training for us, but no science and nothing technical, and you got 20 minutes, because this is like a super special group." And I was like, oh crap, how am I going to do that? Because I'm thinking, I'm training the forecasters and just doing actual support. Now I got to teach operators, SEALs, that the intent is not to make them oceanographers and meteorologists. So that's where I kind of crammed all the key pieces into this card.
You made this card?
Yeah, this is my card.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is like, you can look at just the patterns from the bathymetry, the contours, and it has ramifications.
Bathymetry, I think that's so integral to the work that you do.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So just the shapes on the bottom, the changes in depths, that dictates how the waves will behave, and that's all predictable. And these are the kinds of things you can see in overhead capability. So I've just been developing that for the last 20 years, and so that's what I do. Interesting.
What about now? I know this whole thing going on in town with the sand, and that'd be kind of cool. It's something to touch on, I think.
Yeah.
Before we go out and look at the waves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit
so
about
it's a
what's
natural
your take
extension.
on yeah, exactly. What's going on with that?
So I started getting involved in this, just donating my time, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago.
To what do we want to call it?
So I'm working with primarily with Bring Back Our Beaches.
Okay, yeah, Bring Back Our Beaches.
Yeah.
And so you're working with them.
Working with them, and we're essentially trying to bring awareness, educate the public. And so as an extension of what I do in the Navy, so instead of forecasting for a person, think of a person-sized, like I got to tell a guy, like, hey, here's where you're going to drift. You're going to drift this direction if you jump in here. And it's all predictive, right? Instead of forecasting like that, I'm just saying, okay, this is the way sand will move. So instead of the guy, well, now I'm just predicting sand. So it's the same principles.
Right.
So and there's a huge misunderstanding of like San Clemente is unique, right? And that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to educate people on is when you think of Dana Point to Cottons, we are in a giant bay.
Yep.
And for the most part, the sand stays in this bay. It moves around in the bay. We have issues in places. The issue that we have is that sand is no longer naturally making its way to the coast from the mountains. And that is just the reason for that is the storm channels, the drain, all of that has been so well done to keep us from flooding.
But
right?
that has to do with development a lot, right?
Yeah, so you have all this development, and then you have flood control, which is necessary when you have all of life and property. Mm-hmm. And so it's so effective that the sand just doesn't make it to the coast. The sand is like
cut off. Yeah.
It's stuck up in the mountains. And the amount of money to get that sand back here, think bureaucracy, and then more bureaucracy, and then throw some unions in there, maybe 10. You're talking millions and millions of dollars. So where we used to naturally get sand from the mountains, no longer here.
Right.
Okay.
So no new sand coming in.
No new sand, essentially not.
There's
Virtually
aspect
none.
one.
Yeah, that's the huge part. It's like you're trying to live off a nest egg without any interest. Eventually, it's going to go away. So the last big dump we got here was at the finish completion of the harbor. Okay, we got about 2.5 million cubic yards roughly then, and that was 55 or so years ago, right? All of the Dana points. Okay, it's now just one point, but they had to bust down the point. The Princess Point, I think, was and so all that sand was released into the system. So we've been good until about 5 years ago.
Yeah. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you could tell it was
certain places always going to be screwed. Beach Road.
Yeah.
The trailer parks at North Beach.
They're bummed.
There's no fixing that. And the reason is if you go back in the old pictures, they put those homes on top of the sand dunes. And the sand dunes are nature's protective point. So once you do that and you have any kind of wave action hitting something hard, that beach fronting it, done.
Yeah.
So I remember in the 80s as a kid, the McNulty's had their place. Yeah. And so I was kind of familiar with Beach Road. It's like, oh yeah, big waves. We're going to get waves in the living room. So it's not like it's a new problem.
Right.
It's you put a hard object there, it will destroy the beach in front of it. So the only way to fix places like that, and I hate to say this, and this is, you're either going to put like in front of places like that, tons and tons and tons and tons of sand, okay? But where you get that, and it's going to move, so then you got this problem reoccurring, is some kind of like breakwater or artificial
like
reef.
A jetty or,
Yeah, a jetty, it's the problem with a jetty where a jetty wouldn't work in San Clemente because we got, our sand moves back and forth. And so if you put a jetty in there, it's going to stop it somewhere. So one side's going to get screwed. So for example, this winter, we've got all this northwest swell that's been moving down coast.
Yeah.
And so that's replenished the very south end at Cotton's. And Cotton's, that left, keeps that sand from leaving the system. The left sets up a current.
Yeah, and then around the corner at Uppers, it's not touching that.
Yeah, and so it's different.
It's all stuck in the bay.
And so everything kind of stays, Cotton's traps it. So if you go down to Cotton's, you can now ride your bike past it at low tide, where you couldn't do that for the last 5 years ago.
But they've been putting sand down there.
So they put sand at T Street, but we fortunately had the northwest wind drift. So it moved it all down. So it was like perfect. Nobody could have planned that because we don't get that every winter.
It's true.
And so this winter has been a very active northwest wind swell winter. So within that system, we've got this system, this bay that really holds sand. We just got to add sand periodically. But we got to get to some baseline, whatever that is, maybe 1 million cubic yards. It's hard to say. And then after that, it's just a matter of periodically dropping sand because we just got to keep sand from hitting the hard objects.
How much have they dumped so far?
I think like 240,000 cubic yards.
So a quarter of what a quarter of what we really need to fully replenish. But then
roughly,
my question about that is, so whatever took the sand originally, wouldn't it just take the sand again?
So think about this. So we've been fine for 50 plus years. So we lose sand very slowly. And the way we lose sand, think of extreme wave events.
Right.
So the migration and change on the beach, when you get big waves, whether it's a southern hemisphere swell or the rare winter swells, which we actually had a few good sized ones this year, these waves move up, they take beach, they pull the beach offshore, they make sandbars. When the waves get small, those sandbars re-nourish the beach. So that's the natural state. But if you have extreme events, let's say you have this really extreme wave event, it's huge, so big that sand gets pulled past those sandbars where it can't get back in.
Yeah.
And so that's like beyond the point of return, the depth of closure is called like kind of this depth. And so that's how we lose sand over time. And a little bit will leak out of the system, go south, but just a little bit. It mostly stays in the system, but think about it. We've been good for 50 plus years with doing nothing. And we've been screwing things.
Little by little, it marched itself toward a direction. Because like I look
it's moving back and forth.
Pictures that I see in the 70s that I remember we were at the beach at the pier. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah. But there was
so much beach.
So in the 70s, think about it. That was after all that sand was released. And so there was actually more sand.
Yeah. Well, we had sandbars that came out of T Street Canyon still flowed.
Yeah.
All these canyons still flowed. Not
So we had
maybe
an
as good as they did
overabundance.
in the 50s, but I mean, yeah, we had a lot of sand.
So that Dana Point burst at the close of the harbor was like this huge burst of like additional sand that was more than, because you also, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
then we were fine. So if we just find whatever that baseline is,
Just keep
keep
adding
putting
it on.
sand. But then there's those problem areas like Beach Road and, you know, anywhere with hard armoring, there needs to be special care. And the other ones around town, like, you know, you know, just Mariposa Point, you just need enough sand in front of it.
Okay.
Because it was always fine. You know, we'd have waves that would reach it, but then on the low energy, the sand would build back up. It was never a giant beach.
No, but
it
I mean,
was a
even as a
beach.
kid, 204 was a full beach.
Yeah, and
You
so
know?
then we just need to get enough sand back in the system
As a base.
as a base, and then this thing will work.
And then, you know, probably that won't be the end of ever needing that again.
No, it has to continue,
Continue kind of juicing it up.
just
but
like
then-
it used to. It has to,
But naturally.
naturally.
Right,
So
but
we're
so now
playing.
we're
playing
God.
nature, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to do
That's
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I know you're on the, you know, with the people that are helping that. What
It's
did
just
you
bringing
call it?
awareness, bring back
Uh-huh.
our beaches. We're trying to like just educate the public, because a lot of times people think, like, they see, like, for example, we dump all the sand, and you go down to the beach right now and you see like the beach is smaller.
Well, it's orange from the new sand, which I believe came from Oceanside.
It was, well, originally it came from Oceanside, but then the sand that's all orange is from Sunset Beach. So up there, so
Yeah,
offshore.
Seal Beach, Sunset.
Yeah, so it's actually
Surfside,
kind of
right,
neat.
yeah.
It's the same grain size and everything. It's all good sand. It's neat because you got to see how the sand moved.
Well,
So it
because
wasn't
it's
just like it
different
stayed
color.
there. Yeah. So that just it'll
That's kinda
eventually all mix in.
It'll mix, yeah.
And
But
it'll bleach
right
out.
now, it's just down there on the pier last night, and yeah, it's very two-tone.
Yeah.
It's Tommy two-tone down there.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you know, I think it's interesting for us because here we are. We've watched our waves fall apart to the point of like state parks. I mean,
It was breaking last night.
Mariposa. I know, but
Yeah.
was it really?
Well, I mean,
You know what I mean? Like,
it wasn't right on the shore. So there's
Okay.
actual sandbars down there.
Okay.
There's sandbars all the way down to Cottons right now. Like,
Okay.
now, are they good sandbars? Well, we need waves to make
to
holes
carve it,
and
so
carve
we have
it.
deep spots.
Yeah, so just sand doesn't solve
No,
the
it
issue.
actually
It's
is
time
terrible,
and
actually.
wave events.
to sculpt it. So
Yes.
the nature will sculpt it. We just add the sand. Well, I
it's
mean, it's a
time.
heck of a theory. I know that, you know, there's a lot of people that have the idea, not a lot, but, you know, people have the idea that, you know, like in Newport and different places, like you said, we have
Yeah.
a different situation here, right?
Totally
But there's
different
a whole,
situation.
you know, people are like, is that going to work? I mean, people have this idea, and I've entertained it with different people. I'll talk different stuff is the only way you could is to do, you know, jetties and breakwaters and all that. But I've always said for different reasons. And
Yeah.
you mentioned, I've always felt like our town isn't a breakwater town.
No.
We're just not the city hall. There's a lot of liability with people surfing and getting hit in the. I just feel like that's just not our style. Whether it
And
would be-
thankfully, we don't need
we don't need it.
groins or jetties.
Okay.
So if it would actually make it worse, like if we put, just think, like,
It would make it more coagulated.
yeah, so you'd have, for all this sand that has been necessary for the south end of town, that would have never gotten there.
Okay.
And so
yeah, it makes sense.
And
Yeah.
then the typical flow of sand is actually from south to north because of
Mm-hmm.
that Cotton's Drift, and most of our swells
and similar
are
in
from
Newport,
south
where they
swell.
have them, you know, they get a lot of
Yeah.
south with north or whatever.
And the thing about Newport that's different that you brought up is, so where San Clemente has Cottons at one end and Dana Point on the other, which essentially hold the sand in the system, is Newport, you got a submarine canyon. So when you get the northwest wind swell, if there weren't groins there, that sand would go out in the canyon.
Be history.
Yeah, and so they do a lot of nourishment. They've been doing it for like, I think, 50 years.
Yeah.
We're late to the game.
Sure, they've been adding forever. And
this
they
is-
have beautiful,
they
big,
got
wide
beautiful beaches,
And
but-
speaking of a deep canyon, I mean, the
Yeah.
waves at the Wedge,
Yeah.
the waves at Newport Point. Oh my God, those are like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like mini.
So
Porto
they
right
needed
there.
the groins.
Okay.
It's
For
a-
their
it's a
particular
tool.
geographical reality,
Yeah.
they need the groins, but San Clemente with its
No,
own
it would screw us up.
would totally screw us up. So all we have is what we're doing now with is replenishing.
And then they're gonna have to. The city is working on with a contract engineering company to come up with different ideas on how to deal with some of these problem spots that I mentioned. You know, like particularly the North Beach area, because if you go down there, you see all the beautiful sand they just added, but then you got the trailer homes and then that rock,
Yeah.
and then adjacent to that, so there's no beach in front of the trailer homes.
None.
That's expected. That's predictable.
Sure.
And then you had this beautiful beach, and you still have it, but you have this huge scouring right next to the rocks because just think of waves coming in, hitting those rocks, all that energy exploding, and then it carves out the soft sand and just basically removes it. So the problem is those rocks.
The rocks, yeah. What's it called? Riprap or something?
Yeah, riprap. Yeah. So really the solution out there is
riprap.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from.
Rocks, riprap, whatever. The first time I heard it, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, so you got to do some kind of, there's got to be some kind of offshore barrier to the waves. Now, you don't, see, the breakwater is a frightening thing because if breakwater means no waves.
Yes,
right in that vicinity.
We have a breakwater here, I mean.
Yeah, think of Baby
Let me
Beach.
ask you about the harbor. Speaking of breakwaters.
Yeah.
There also is a theory amongst, all of us non-oceanographers, okay? But we're all surfers and we have our nature about understanding things, right or wrong. We're probably right or wrong, who knows? But as a result of Dana Point Harbor being built, didn't that have a big effect also on our bay?
So I think so. So here's how that would have affected it. Okay, it doesn't solve anything with regarding the development around it, right? Don't you still think even if they didn't put the harbor in, we'd still have all this development? We'd have to have the storm channel of San Juan Creek. So San Juan Creek was our primary source of sand.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So
right
here's
there at Doheny.
Yeah. So here's how it worked. So basically, if you just remove all the homes, like all of them, all the way out to Mission Viejo. So people out there, they're responsible for our beaches going away, just like everybody is, right?
Sure.
Because
it's
those homes are there. That storm channel is protecting everybody, right? So if we removed all of that and it's all natural state, think of the San Mateo, like Camp Pendleton, like natural. That's like natural, pretty much natural. Style, okay, so think of it look like that, and there's no harbor. So a front comes through, storm front comes through, drops tons of rain. The rivers swell, all that water comes down with all the sediment and the sand, breaks the Baymouth Bar. That's that sand that plugs up, that just naturally grows, that plugs up. Think of the one at Uppers.
Yeah, at Uppers,
right?
like it'll
that
break
pond.
it open.
And it doesn't break open every year.
Sure.
Maybe not every couple years.
But when a big one,
When a big one comes, that's our source of sand, right? For Trestle's area, not for San Clemente, but like San Juan Creek was the source. So front comes through. Behind the front is the northwest wind. The wind C.
Yeah.
Okay, so then wind swell is what sets up the alongshore drift. So you'd have, boom, Baymouth Bar breaks out, tons of sand comes out. Now you've got the front passing and you got northwest wind swell, and that moves it throughout San Clemente. So yes, Dana Point has had an impact. Because think about what happens now. If you're standing up on the cliff there in Capo Beach, you see that breakwater extending all the way. Far. That has completely cut off the wind swell. There's no wind swell where that river is. The only thing that gets in there is swell, mostly southerly swell. So you get a little current from the right that breaks on the bar, but then that just moves the sand kind of locally, and it probably drifts down a little bit. But a lot of the sand is coming up in the south swells.
Yeah.
So that was the main driver of getting that sand spread into the system, was the wind swell, and that's inoculated with the harbor for wind swell. Northwest swell, it breaks just like a south swell, like it just wraps in and breaks parallel. So it's the wind swell that's the key, and that breakwater extends so far.
It does.
It's a shadow.
Yeah.
And I was just down there last week when the last front, I was taking some videos because I'm going to do a little video piece for Bring Back Our Beaches on just showing that that wind shadow. And so that wind shadow, you don't really see that wind swell start until you get to like Capo Beach. Till you get to like the end of the campground.
Until it starts hitting.
And then it starts breaking, and then it's moving sand. But you can see how
it's coagulated.
It's busted. It's broken.
And that's what I feel like for give or take, not knowing nearly as much as you do, but just thinking of us, like say we're trying to surf Mariposa and we look up and we see the harbor, and it just feels like what I used to see surfing there in like say 50 years ago in 1975, the waves on the outer reef at Mariposa would break all the way through.
See, I wasn't around before the harbor, so
neither was I. But it was so close after it was built that it took a lot. Like you saw the degradation before your very eyes. Yeah, you know, like
there would have been massive changes
anyway.
Just with putting such an enormous like
infrastructure in place, right? Yeah,
it
but
just
I mean,
happens.
with would you say the harbor added to it or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, well, all
Definitely
we can
has
do
an
is hope
impact.
for the best on that on some degree. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still, you know, like we could,
So
who
if
knows? All we can do is
beaches,
try.
if we keep nourishing, we'll be fine in San Clemente. Now, if
Okay.
it was another beach, like let's say we're up in Central California, where the drift is primarily, or even up in LA County, like you look at aerial images of LA County, and it's predominantly a northwest drift, and you see the different groins, and you see like sand collecting on either side. The sand would just leave, like here. If we didn't have this bay, and we had wind swell, we were not facing southwest or south-southwest, and we barely get wind swell in San Clemente, right?
Right.
It takes a lot to get in
It does,
here.
as compared to like say Huntington.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is wide open.
Exactly.
Exposed, you know, yeah.
Exactly. So we're protected in that sense. And then like just, you know, with the prefrontal south winds that we had yesterday, that set up a northward drift, short period, sharp angle. And so it's interesting as it's moving, you know, this sand. So we have, you know, this front coming through and south winds. And so it's generating and it's pushing it back, and it just goes back and forth in the system.
Yeah.
And that's the thing people need to understand. And the beach is always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, you blink and then
There's
it's
something
different.
different,
And
yeah.
as long as we have enough sand in the system, these natural ebbs and flows of the beach size, as long as we can keep enough beach in front of anything hard.
Okay.
That's
yeah.
the key.
That makes sense.
And that's on the city, and that's on, you know, I think the OCTA to make sure that when they put that stuff up there, that riprap, that the most important thing is they make sure there's beach in front of it to protect
that
because when
from itself.
Yes, because that waves hit that destroys the beach. So destroy the beach. Like think about like Cypress Shores, where you had all the landslides. You had so much sand that was moved probably after Marie, like scoured and moved north to like Lost Winds, and you can see in cross section sand moved. And then all of a sudden you have so much weight that's removed from, you know, this is all ancient landslides. Like everything's just sliding around here, right?
Yeah.
But then you have all this weight removed from this toe, like sand, it's moved, and all of a sudden what's happening in Cypress Shores? They're getting like cliff fails and landslides and all kinds, probably related to that
Related
somehow.
to that, I mean, similar at North Beach. 204, they had a big one right there at Casa Romantica, right? They're right by headquarters. I mean,
that's why the cliffs are beautiful, because they're eroding. And it's like, that's why, I mean, we don't have the problem to have a house on a cliff. But if I was ever, this is why I go back when I was a make-believe landslide geologist, and I was going down these holes and doing this in San Clemente and learning about how, man, we're just on a bunch of landslides. And so I was like, okay, for me, I don't have the problem. I'm not going to have to ever like wonder if I'm going to buy a house on a cliff, or on a beach. But I would do neither. I would rent. But if I'm up on the cliff and my house is going down, I'd be like, you know, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, dude. Every
Just
time I've
hold on
seen
tight.
it, I've always been like, well, guys,
Yeah.
come on. You built it on the cliff. What do you expect? But,
Yeah.
you know, I've lived on the cliff a few times renting. Right? Yeah, of course. But buying there, I mean, if I
Grab
did.
your gear and go.
Yeah, if I did ever be in some country where I bought by the cliff, I'd be back, you know,
Yeah. So
quite
you've got
a ways.
some time, because eventually
it's
that is going to
come.
be the cliff.
But I'd go further enough back where I'd have a big front yard.
Sure.
You know, I'd just be like, well, whatever. But yeah, that's really interesting stuff. I mean, Charlie, I'm just super stoked to sit with you, learn more about, you know, what makes you tick and your life story, and just super stoked you came to talk to the doctor, mister.
Oh, appreciate it, doctor.
Awesome, man.
My prescription, I need it.
Thank you.